I knew the moment I saw Brenda's smug face through my kitchen window that this winter was going to be a nightmare. Moving to Maplewood Estates in suburban Connecticut seemed like the perfect decision back in September. The neighborhood was pristine, the houses were beautiful, and the community appeared tight-knit. What I didn't know was that our Home Owner Association president, Brenda Hartwell, ruled the subdivision like a tyrant with a measuring tape and an endless supply of violation notices. She was everything you'd expect from an HOA president who had too much time on her hands. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair that never moved in the wind, designer athleisure where that had never seen a gym, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant whenever she looked at anyone under 50. My name is Zachary Jennings, and I work from home as a software developer. The remote work setup was precisely why I'd chosen this house with its spacious home office and quiet surroundings. I'm 32, single, and generally keep to myself. I maintain my property, pay my dues on time, and stay out of everyone's business. Apparently, that wasn't enough for Brenda. The trouble started in early November when I received my first violation notice. I'd left my trash cans visible from the street for approximately 4 hours after collection day. The fine was $50. I paid it, rolled my eyes, and moved on. The second notice came 2 weeks later because my lawn was a 1/4 inch too long according to the HOA's winter grass height requirements. Another $50. By December, I'd received 6 notices for increasingly ridiculous violations. Holiday decorations up 2 days too early, car parked in driveway overnight instead of garage, mailbox needed repainting, and my personal favorite, unauthorized garden gnome creating visual discord with neighborhood aesthetic standards. I tried to be diplomatic. I attended an HOA meeting in December and politely suggested that perhaps the rules were a bit excessive. Brenda had looked at me like I'd suggested burning down the clubhouse. She'd spent 15 minutes lecturing me about property values and community standards while the other board members, her friends Tammy and Susan, nodded along like bobbleheads. The 20 or so other homeowners in attendance avoided eye contact, clearly having learned long ago that fighting Brenda was futile. What I didn't realize was that Brenda lived directly across the street from me. Her house was the largest in the subdivision, a sprawling colonial with columns that she probably thought made it look stately, but actually made it look like a wannabe plantation. Her driveway was heated, which I only knew because she mentioned it constantly. She also had a landscaping service that came weekly, a cleaning service, and apparently unlimited free time to patrol the neighborhood looking for violations. The first major snowstorm of the season hit on January 3rd. Connecticut winters are brutal, and this one dumped 18 inches on us overnight. I woke up at 6 in the morning to find my driveway completely buried. My truck was barely visible in the garage. The county plows had come through and left a massive berm of heavy, wet snow across the end of my driveway as they always do. It would take hours to clear by hand. I got dressed in my warmest clothes, grabbed my snow shovel and headed out. The temperature was a brutal 15 degrees, and the wind made it feel even colder. I started attacking the berm at the end of the driveway, knowing that was the hardest part. The plow had compressed the snow into something resembling concrete. After 45 minutes, my back was screaming, and I'd barely made a dent. That's when I heard the rumble of a diesel engine. I looked up to see a professional snowplow truck pulling into Brenda's driveway. Of course, she'd hired someone. The driver made quick work of her driveway, pushing all the snow to the sides in neat piles. The whole operation took maybe 10 minutes. Brenda came out in a white parka that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, handed the driver what I assumed was payment, and waved cheerfully as he drove away. She noticed me watching and actually walked across the street. I should have known this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. "Zachary, I need to speak with you about the snow removal," she said, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "What about it?" I leaned on my shovel, already exhausted and not in the mood for whatever this was going to be. The HOA bylaws clearly state that all driveways must be cleared within 24 hours of snowfall ending. It's now been approximately 7 hours since the snow stopped, and you've barely made progress. This affects the neighborhood's appearance. I stared at her. "Brenda, it's 6:45 in the morning. I've been out here for almost an hour. I'm clearing it as fast as I can. Perhaps you should have hired a professional service like I did. It's the responsible thing to do." She smiled that condescending smile I'd come to loathe. "Perhaps not everyone has the budget for that," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "That's not the HOA's concern. I'll give you until this evening, but if it's not completely clear by sunset, that's a violation. $200 fine for snow removal non-compliance." She turned and walked back to her pristine driveway without waiting for a response. I wanted to throw my shovel at her. Instead, I went back to work, fuming. It took me another 3 hours to clear my driveway. My shoulders felt like they were on fire, and my fingers were numb despite the heavy gloves. When I finally finished, I went inside, took a hot shower, and tried to focus on work. I had a deadline approaching for a client, and I'd already lost half the day to snow removal. Around 3 in the afternoon, I took a break and looked out my window. Brenda was outside with what appeared to be a tape measure, checking the height of snow piles in her neighbor's yard. I shook my head and went back to my computer. The next morning brought another 6 inches of snow. Not as bad as the first storm, but enough to require clearing again. I got up early, determined to get it done quickly before Brenda could start her timer. I was halfway through when I heard her garage door open. She pulled out in her massive black Escalade, clearly heading somewhere. She'd hired the plow service again because her driveway was already spotless. As she backed out onto the street, she stopped next to where I was working. She rolled down her window. "Make sure you get all the way to the edges, Zachary, and the sidewalk needs to be completely clear too. I noticed yesterday you left about an inch of snow on it. That's a safety hazard and a violation." Before I could respond, she drove off. I stood there, gripping my shovel so hard my knuckles hurt. The sidewalk had been clear. Maybe there'd been a dusting of snow overnight, but I'd shoveled it at 6 in the morning. She was just harassing me at this point. I finished clearing everything, making sure it was absolutely perfect. Then I went inside and did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and read through all 87 pages. If Brenda wanted to play by the rules, I needed to know them just as well as she did. That's when I found something interesting. Section 12, Paragraph 4. No homeowner shall impede, block, or otherwise obstruct another homeowner's driveway access for any reason. Violations will result in a fine of $500 per occurrence. I smiled for the first time in days. This could be useful. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, another storm system moved through. This one was lighter, only about 4 inches, but it was the heavy, wet snow that's a pain to move. I watched the county plow come through around midnight from my living room window. I'd been working late on my project. The plow did its usual job, pushing snow from the street into berms at the end of everyone's driveways. But something seemed off. The berm at the end of my driveway was massive, way bigger than anyone else's on the street. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to look. My driveway entrance was completely blocked by at least 3 feet of densely packed snow. It would take me hours to clear. But more importantly, when I walked over to examine it closely, I could see that this wasn't just snow from the plow. Someone had added to it. A lot. The snow had a different texture in places, and there were clear shovel marks. I walked back to my house and checked my security camera footage. I'd installed cameras a few weeks ago, partly because of all the HOA drama and partly just for general security. I scrolled back to around 11:30 before the county plow came through. There she was, crystal clear on the video. Brenda in her white parka with a snow shovel, piling snow from her driveway and yard onto the end of mine. She made about 20 trips, building up a wall of snow across my driveway entrance. Then she went back inside. 30 minutes later, the county plow came through and added to it, cementing her handiwork into an impenetrable barrier. I was furious. This was deliberate sabotage. But I was also calculating. I saved the video footage to 3 different locations and went to bed. I'd deal with this in the morning. I woke up at dawn and looked outside. Brenda's driveway was already cleared. The plow service had been there early. She was outside in her perfectly pressed winter wear, a coffee mug in her hand, surveying her domain like a queen. Then I saw something that made my blood boil. She was taking photos of my blocked driveway. She was documenting it for a violation notice. I got dressed quickly and headed outside. I needed a plan and fast. That's when I remembered old Joe from 3 houses down. He was retired, and I'd chatted with him a few times. He'd mentioned he had a small plow attachment for his ATV that he used to clear his driveway. I walked down to his house and knocked. He answered in a bathrobe, looking confused. "Zachary, everything okay? It's 7 in the morning. Joe, I need a huge favor. Can I borrow your plow setup? I'll pay you for it." He raised an eyebrow. "Brenda problems." "How'd you know?" He chuckled. "Son, we've all had Brenda problems. I got 6 violation notices in my first month here. Come on, I'll help you get it set up." 20 minutes later, I was driving Joe's ATV with the plow attachment up the street toward my house. Joe had given me a quick tutorial and wished me luck. He'd also mentioned, with a knowing smile, that he'd be sure to be out in his yard around the time I started plowing. Witnesses were good. I pulled into my driveway from the side yard, bypassing the blocked entrance. Brenda was still outside, now talking on her phone. She saw me with the plow and her expression changed. She quickly ended her call and started walking toward my property. "Zachary, where did you get that equipment?" "Borrowed it from Joe. I'm clearing my driveway as per the HOA bylaws, within 24 hours of snowfall, right? That equipment needs to be approved by the HOA board for aesthetic purposes. You can't just bring any machinery onto the property." I pulled out my phone and opened the bylaws. Actually, Section 9, Paragraph 2. Homeowners may use any reasonable equipment for property maintenance, snow removal, and lawn care, provided it meets local noise ordinances and is operated during permitted hours. It's 7:15 in the morning, and noise is permitted from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Her face went red. "Well, you need to be careful where you put that snow. You can't put it on common areas or other properties." "Don't worry, Brenda. I know exactly where I'm putting it." I started up the ATV and began clearing my driveway. The plow made quick work of the entrance, pushing the heavy snow to the sides. It felt amazing after days of back-breaking shovel work. I cleared the entire driveway in about 15 minutes, making neat piles on either side of my property. Brenda had gone back to her house, but I could see her watching from her front window. Now came the part I'd been thinking about all morning. The part that was probably petty and definitely going to escalate things. But I was done being her target. I looked at Brenda's pristine parking area. Her driveway was clear, but she had this fancy expanded parking pad to the right of her driveway where she always parked her Escalade. It was spotless, recently cleared by her expensive plow service. The black asphalt was completely visible, melting solution already spread on it. I thought about all the violation notices, the harassment, the deliberate blocking of my driveway, which she'd clearly done to set me up for another fine. I pulled up the security footage on my phone one more time, making sure I had it. Then I made a decision. I drove the ATV down to the end of my driveway and positioned myself at the street. Then I lowered the plow and drove across the street, pushing the massive berm of snow that Brenda had created, plus all the extra snow from the county plow, directly into her parking pad. The pile was enormous, easily 4 feet high and covering the entire area where she parked her vehicle. I made 3 passes, making sure to get every bit of the snow that had blocked my driveway. When I was done, her precious parking spot looked like a miniature ski slope. I drove the ATV back to my property and shut it off. My heart was pounding. I just declared war. Brenda burst out of her front door like a rocket. She was screaming before she even made it to the street. "What have you done? Are you insane? That's destruction of property. That's harassment." "I'm calling the police." I stepped off the ATV calmly. "Actually, Brenda, I'm just clearing my driveway as per HOA regulations. The snow had to go somewhere. You deliberately plowed it onto my parking area, my clean parking area." "Well, someone deliberately piled it in front of my driveway last night. Funny how that works." I pulled out my phone and showed her the security footage. "This is you at 11:30 last night, blocking my driveway with snow from your property. That's a direct violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws. Blocking another homeowner's driveway. That's a $500 fine, Brenda." Her face went from red to purple. You can't prove that was deliberate." "The video shows about 20 trips with a shovel, building a wall across my driveway entrance. I'd say that's pretty deliberate. And then you were out here this morning taking photos, presumably to write me a violation notice for not clearing it." Several neighbors had come outside now. Joe was in his yard, arms crossed, watching with barely concealed amusement. The couple from 2 houses down, Mike and Patricia, were on their front porch. Even old Mrs. Chen from the corner house was watching from her window. Brenda looked around and realized she had an audience. She tried to compose herself. "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I was simply redistributing snow for better drainage purposes." "At 11:30 at night, in the dark, onto my property specifically?" I shook my head. "I don't think so, and you know what else? I'm filing a formal complaint with the HOA board about your conduct. This is harassment and it needs to stop. I'll have you removed from this neighborhood," she hissed. "I'll find every violation, every little thing you do wrong, and I'll fine you until you're forced to sell." "That sounds like a threat, Brenda. In front of witnesses." I gestured to the neighbors. Several of them nodded. She turned and stomped back to her house, slamming the door so hard I was surprised the frame didn't crack. I returned the ATV to Joe, who was grinning ear to ear. "That was the most beautiful thing I've seen in years," he said. "Brenda's had this coming for a long time. She's driven 3 families out of this neighborhood with her constant harassment and fines. 3 families. Yep, young couple with kids left last year. She reported them for their children's toys being visible in the yard. Fined them repeatedly until they couldn't afford it anymore. Nice family, too. The husband before that got into it with her about his truck. She said it was too old and ugly for the neighborhood. Made his life hell until he sold and moved. And before that, There was a retired teacher who painted her shutters the wrong shade of gray. Not kidding. The wrong shade. Brenda harassed her for months. I felt sick. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Joe sighed. The other board members are her friends. They vote however she tells them to, and most of the neighborhood is scared of her. She's got money, lawyers, and way too much time. People just pay the fines and try to stay under her radar. Well, I'm not doing that. Good, be careful though, son. She's vindictive. Joe had no idea how right he was. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was a violation for improper snow removal resulting in damage to community aesthetics. The fine was $500. She'd also scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting for that evening to discuss my disruptive behavior. I took photos of the notice, checked my security footage to see when she'd posted it, which was 6 in the morning, and started preparing my case. I gathered all my documentation, every violation notice she'd given me, the security footage of her blocking my driveway, photos of the snow pile she'd created, and the video of me clearing my driveway. I also printed out the relevant sections of the HOA bylaws. The meeting was at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I arrived at 6:45 to find the parking lot already half full. Apparently word had spread about the confrontation, and people wanted to see what would happen. Inside, Brenda sat at the head table with Tammy and Susan on either side. All three women were dressed like they were attending a corporate board meeting. Brenda wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my car payment. The other homeowners sat in folding chairs facing the table. I recognized most of them from the neighborhood. I took a seat in the middle of the room. Joe gave me a nod from 2 rows back. Brenda called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. She went through the usual boring business, minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, upcoming events. Then she got to the main event. "We have a serious matter to discuss tonight," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "A resident has engaged in what can only be described as aggressive and retaliatory behavior toward another homeowner. Specifically, Zachary Jennings deliberately plowed snow onto my personal parking area after I had it professionally cleared. Murmurs went through the crowd. I'd like to show evidence of the damage and disruption this caused." She pulled up photos on a laptop connected to a projector. The images showed the massive pile of snow covering her parking pad. "As you can see, this was a deliberate act of aggression." "I'd like to respond to that," I said, standing up. Brenda looked annoyed. "You'll have a chance to speak when I'm finished." Actually, according to the HOA bylaws, any homeowner has the right to address accusations immediately. Section 19, paragraph 1. She glared at me but nodded curtly. "Fine, speak." I walked to the front and connected my own laptop to the projector. I'd like to provide context that Brenda conveniently left out. I played the security footage of her piling snow across my driveway entrance at 11:30 at night. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I let it play for a full minute, showing multiple trips with the shovel. "This is Brenda Hartwell deliberately blocking my driveway with snow from her property. She did this knowing the county plow would come through shortly after and make it even worse. The next morning, she was outside taking photos of my blocked driveway, presumably to write me another violation notice. I pulled up the relevant bylaw section. Section 12, paragraph 4 states that no homeowner shall block another homeowner's driveway for any reason. The fine for this violation is $500 per occurrence. Brenda violated this policy deliberately and maliciously. Brenda stood up, her face flushed. "That's taken out of context. I was simply managing snow on my property." At 11:30 at night. By carrying it across the street to my driveway. How is that managing your property, Brenda? The other homeowners were whispering now. I could see some of them nodding in agreement. Furthermore, I continued, Brenda has been systematically harassing me since I moved here in September. I've received 12 violation notices in 4 months, many for absurd reasons. I pulled out the stack of notices and read through some of them. Garden gnome creating visual discord. Trash cans visible for 4 hours. Car parked in my own driveway overnight. These aren't reasonable enforcement of community standards. This is targeted harassment. Joe stood up from his seat. I'd like to speak in support of Zachary. I've lived here for 8 years, and I've watched Brenda drive multiple families out of this neighborhood with exactly this kind of behavior. She picks a target and harasses them until they leave. It's wrong, and it needs to stop. Patricia stood up next. I agree. My husband and I have gotten violation notices for things like our doormat being the wrong color and our mailbox flag being slightly crooked. We're terrified to do anything with our property because we don't know what will set her off. More homeowners started standing and sharing their stories. It was like a dam had broken. People who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. Story after story of unreasonable fines, petty violations, and harassment. Brenda's face got redder and redder. Tammy and Susan looked uncomfortable. They'd been nodding along with Brenda at the start, but now they seemed unsure. This is ridiculous, Brenda snapped. I enforce the rules fairly and equally. If people would just follow the bylaws, there wouldn't be any issues. The bylaws don't say anything about garden gnomes, I pointed out. You made that up, and you certainly don't enforce them equally. Your holiday decorations went up a full week before the permitted date last month. I have photos. But you didn't write yourself a violation notice, did you? She had no response to that. An older man in the back stood up. I'd seen him around but didn't know his name. I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in Brenda Hartwell as HOA president. Her conduct has been detrimental to the community and she's abusing her position. Seconded, Joe called out immediately. Brenda looked panicked. You can't do that. That's not how this works. I pulled out my phone with the bylaws pulled up. Actually, Section 23 allows for removal of board members by a 2/3 majority vote of homeowners present at any official meeting. This is an official meeting. Tammy whispered something to Susan. They both looked at Brenda and then at the crowd of angry homeowners. All in favor of removing Brenda Hartwell as HOA president? Tammy asked quietly. Hands shot up around the room. I counted quickly. Out of 32 homeowners present, 29 voted in favor. Only Brenda and 2 of her close friends voted against. The motion passes, Tammy said, looking relieved. Brenda, you're removed from the board effective immediately. Brenda stood there, stunned. For the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. She grabbed her laptop and purse and walked out of the clubhouse without another word. The room erupted in applause and chatter. People came up to thank me for finally standing up to her. Joe clapped me on the shoulder. You did good, kid. This neighborhood needed that. The rest of the meeting was spent discussing next steps. Tammy agreed to serve as interim president until elections could be held. One of the first motions passed was to review all violation notices issued in the past year and refund fines that were deemed unreasonable. Mine were at the top of the list. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors thanking me and sharing their own relief that Brenda was gone. But I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The next morning, I woke up to find all 4 of my tires slashed. My truck sat in my driveway, clearly vandalized. I checked my security cameras immediately. The footage showed a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask approaching my truck at 3 in the morning. They spent about 5 minutes slashing the tires and then disappeared into the night. The figure was clearly female based on the build and movement, and they came from the direction of Brenda's house. I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived within 20 minutes, took my statement and reviewed the footage. "You have any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I have suspicions, but I can't prove it from the footage alone. The person is masked, but you think you know who it is." I explained the whole situation with Brenda, the HOA meeting, and her removal from the board. Officer Martinez listened carefully, taking notes. "We'll investigate, but without a clear identification, it's going to be hard to press charges. I recommend you file a report with your insurance and maybe invest in some additional security measures." He gave me a case number and left. I called my insurance company and then a tow truck to take my vehicle to get new tires. The whole thing cost me $800 after my deductible. I also called a security company and had them install additional cameras with better night vision and motion-activated lights around my property. If Brenda or anyone else wanted to try something again, I'd be ready. The tire slashing seemed to be her last act of retaliation, though. The next few weeks were quiet. I saw her occasionally, coming and going from her house, but she avoided eye contact and never approached me. Her Escalade had a new dent in the front bumper, which I noticed one morning. I wondered if she'd hit something in her anger. The HOA held elections in February, and a retired accountant named Richard was elected president. He immediately began reviewing and revising the bylaws, removing the ridiculous provisions and making the rules more reasonable. The newsletter that month announced that the violation fine system was being overhauled to focus on actual problems rather than petty aesthetics. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. In early March, I received a certified letter. It was from a law firm representing Brenda Hartwell. She was suing me for harassment, emotional distress, and property damage related to the snow plowing incident. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the letter, feeling my stomach drop. This was escalating in a way I hadn't anticipated. I called my homeowner's insurance company to see if they covered legal issues like this. They said they'd review the case, but that I should probably get my own attorney. I spent the next week consulting with lawyers. Most of them said the lawsuit was frivolous and would likely be dismissed, but I'd still need to respond and possibly go to court. Legal fees would add up quickly. The estimate I got was between $5,000 and $10,000 to defend myself, even if I won. I was stressed, anxious, and angry. This was exactly what Brenda wanted. She couldn't control the HOA anymore, so she was trying to punish me financially through the legal system. Then Joe called me with interesting news. "Zachary, you need to hear this. I was talking to my buddy at the township office today. Turns out Brenda's been under investigation for misappropriating HOA funds." "What?" "Yeah, apparently someone tipped off the township after she was removed from the board. They've been auditing the HOA finances, and there are some serious discrepancies. Money that was supposed to go to community maintenance has been unaccounted for. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars over the past 3 years." I felt a surge of hope. "Is this confirmed?" "They're still investigating, but it looks bad for her." Tammy handed over all the financial records when they requested them. She'd been keeping copies that Brenda didn't know about because she thought something was fishy. I immediately called my attorney and told him about this development. He said it was excellent information, and that we could potentially use it to show a pattern of vindictive behavior and financial misconduct that made her lawsuit appear retaliatory rather than legitimate. The investigation moved quickly. By late March, the local prosecutor's office announced that Brenda Hartwell was being charged with embezzlement and theft. She'd been writing checks to a landscaping company that turned out to be fake. The company was registered to her husband's name. They'd been funneling HOA money into their personal accounts for years, using it to fund their lifestyle while claiming it was for community improvements. The total amount was over $75,000. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People were outraged. The HOA had been complaining about tight budgets for years, cutting back on community events and maintenance, while Brenda had been stealing from them the entire time. Her lawsuit against me was quietly dropped. Her lawyer withdrew from the case, and I never heard about it again. Brenda and her husband tried to keep a low profile, but it was impossible. Their house went up for sale in April with a "motivated seller" sign. The criminal case moved through the system. Brenda tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, that the money was for legitimate expenses, but the paper trail was clear. She'd created false invoices, forged signatures, and systematically stolen from the community she claimed to protect. In June, she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 5 years probation, and was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA plus additional fines. Her husband was charged as an accomplice and received probation and community service. Their house sold in July to a young family with 2 kids. I met them when they moved in. They were friendly, normal people who were just happy to have a nice house in a good neighborhood. I didn't mention the previous owners. The neighborhood changed after Brenda left. It felt lighter, more relaxed. People started actually enjoying their homes instead of constantly worrying about violation notices. The new HOA board under Richard's leadership focused on actual community building rather than petty enforcement. We had summer barbecues, a neighborhood watch program, and even a community garden project. I ran into Joe one Saturday morning in August while we were both working in our yards. "Can you believe it's been almost a year since you moved in?" he asked. "Feels longer, honestly." Those first few months were rough. But you stood up to her. Most people couldn't or wouldn't do that. You probably saved this neighborhood. I just wanted her to stop harassing me. I didn't expect all the rest of it. The embezzlement. Yeah, that was a surprise to everyone. But I think her behavior toward you is what triggered the investigation. When you showed that video at the meeting and people started speaking up, Tammy started wondering what else Brenda might be hiding. That's when she started looking at the financial records more closely. So by blocking my driveway with snow, Brenda basically exposed herself. Joe laughed. Karma has a sense of irony, doesn't it? I thought about that day in January when I'd plowed all that snow onto her pristine parking spot. It had seemed like such a small, petty act of retaliation at the time. But it had triggered a chain of events that exposed years of corruption and freed an entire neighborhood from a tyrant's control. Was I proud of being petty? Not exactly. I could have handled it differently, maybe filed a complaint first, or tried to work through official channels. But something about seeing her standing there with her coffee, taking photos of my blocked driveway after she'd deliberately blocked it herself, had pushed me over the edge. Sometimes you have to push back against bullies. Sometimes you have to stand up and say enough is enough, even if it means getting your hands dirty. Or in this case, getting some snow where it doesn't belong. The neighborhood continued to thrive. Richard proved to be an excellent HOA president, actually listening to homeowners and making decisions that benefited the community rather than his ego. The violation notices became rare and only for actual issues, like someone leaving a broken-down car on their lawn for months or genuine safety concerns. I settled into a comfortable routine. My work went well. I made friends in the neighborhood, and I even started dating someone I met at one of the community barbecues. Her name was Diana Zimmerman, and she lived 2 streets over. She'd moved in just before all the drama with Brenda and had her own stories about unreasonable violation notices. She fined me for having the wrong color flowers in my front bed, Deanna told me over dinner one night. Said they weren't cohesive with the neighborhood palette. I didn't even know we had a neighborhood palette. Garden gnomes, I replied. That was my personal favorite violation. We laughed about it, but there was relief in that laughter. Relief that it was over, that we could live our lives without someone constantly watching and judging and looking for reasons to fine us. Fall came again, bringing beautiful foliage to Connecticut. The neighborhood looked stunning with the trees changing colors. I actually put up some autumn decorations without worrying about whether they were the right shade of orange or if the scarecrow was positioned at the correct angle. When the first snow of the season arrived in November, I was ready. I'd bought my own snow blower over the summer, a nice one with good power and maneuverability. When the storm hit, I cleared my driveway in 30 minutes. Then I did Joe's driveway and Patricia and Mike's and old Mrs. Chen's. The neighborhood had become what it should have been all along, a community. People helped each other out. We looked after one another. We actually knew our neighbors' names and cared about their well-being. I thought about Brenda sometimes, serving her prison sentence. I wondered if she understood what she'd done, if she regretted any of it. Probably not. People like her rarely do. They're so convinced of their own righteousness, so certain that their way is the right way, that they can't see the damage they cause. But I also thought about how one moment, one decision to push back had changed everything. That cold January morning when I'd plowed snow onto her parking spot had seemed like such a small act, but it had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It gave other people courage to speak up. It exposed the cracks in her facade. It started the investigation that revealed her crimes. December brought another big snowstorm. 18 inches again, just like the previous year. I woke up early and got to work with my snow blower. The machine made quick work of my driveway. I cleared the whole thing in less than an hour, including the sidewalk. As I was finishing up, Deanna came over with 2 cups of hot coffee. She lived close enough to walk over, even through the snow. Thought you might need this, she said, handing me a cup. You're a lifesaver. The coffee was perfect, hot and strong. We stood in my driveway, watching the sun rise over the snow-covered neighborhood. It was peaceful, beautiful even, the kind of morning that made winter in Connecticut worth enduring. You know what I don't miss, Deanna said. What? Being afraid to enjoy moments like this. Last year, I'd be stressed about whether my driveway was cleared to the exact specifications, whether my snow pile was in the right spot, whether I'd get a violation notice. Now I can just enjoy the snow. I understood exactly what she meant. That had been Brenda's real crime, beyond the embezzlement. She'd made people afraid to live in their own homes, afraid to enjoy their own properties. She'd turned what should have been a pleasant neighborhood into a stress-filled enforcement zone. You ever regret it? Deanna asked. The whole snow plowing thing, how it escalated. I thought about that for a moment, sipping my coffee and watching the steam rise in the cold air. No, I said finally. I probably should have handled it better, been more mature about it, but I don't regret standing up to her. Someone needed to, and it happened to be me. Everything that came after that was on her. The embezzlement, the arrest, the consequences. Those were the result of her choices, not mine. You're right, she made her own bed, a very uncomfortable bed in a prison cell. We both laughed at that. The rest of the winter passed without incident. More snow came and went. I cleared my driveway and helped my neighbors with theirs. The HOA sent out exactly 0 violation notices for snow removal. It was remarkably peaceful. Spring arrived in March, bringing the usual mud and mess as the snow melted. But it also brought new beginnings. Richard announced at the March HOA meeting that they'd recovered most of the embezzled funds through the restitution order and the sale of Brenda's house. The money would go toward projects that had been delayed for years, repaving the common areas, updating the playground, and renovating the clubhouse. We're also implementing new financial controls, Richard explained. Multiple people will have oversight of the accounts, we'll have quarterly audits, and all expenditures over $500 will require board approval with documentation. This will never happen again. The meeting ended with actual applause. People were excited about the neighborhood's future for the first time in years. I left the meeting feeling good. Joe caught up with me in the parking lot. "Hey, some of us are talking about nominating you for the board in the next election. You interested?" I thought about it. A year ago, I would have said absolutely not. I'd moved here to work quietly and mind my own business, but things were different now. I'd learned that sometimes you have to get involved, have to stand up, have to be part of the solution. "Maybe," I said. "Let me think about it." "Fair enough. But you'd be good at it. You've got principles, and you're not afraid to stand up for what's right." I drove home thinking about that. Was I someone who stood up for what was right? I'd always thought of myself as pretty average, someone who avoided conflict when possible. But the situation with Brenda had shown me something about myself. When pushed, when faced with injustice, I would push back. I wouldn't just roll over and take it. That night, I sat on my back deck with a beer, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Deanna asking if I wanted to have dinner tomorrow night. I smiled and replied yes. Life was good. The neighborhood was good. The drama was behind us. And somewhere, Brenda was learning that actions have consequences, that you can't build a life on intimidation and theft without it eventually crashing down around you. I thought about that massive pile of snow I'd plowed onto her parking spot. In the moment, it had seemed like such a small act of defiance. But in hindsight, it had been the first domino. Everything that followed had started with that decision to fight back instead of just accepting her harassment. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Because sometimes the small acts of resistance are the most important ones. Sometimes refusing to be a victim is what changes everything. The summer brought more positive changes. The playground renovation was completed, and families actually used it without fear of violation notices for their kids being too loud. The 4th of July block party was the best the neighborhood had seen in years. We grilled, set off fireworks, and enjoyed being part of a real community. Deanna and I grew closer. She was smart, funny, and understood what I'd gone through because she'd experienced similar harassment from Brenda. We spent most of our free time together, and I found myself thinking about a future with her. One evening in late July, we were sitting on my front porch when she pointed across the street. "I heard the family that bought Brenda's house is really happy here." "Yeah, I talk to them sometimes. They're good people. The kids are great too." "Do they know what happened with the previous owners?" "I don't think so. No reason to tell them. Let them enjoy the house without that baggage." "You're probably right." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Brenda understands what she did wrong?" "I doubt it. People like her usually think they're the victim, even when they're clearly the perpetrator. She probably thinks she was just enforcing rules and that everyone overreacted. And the embezzlement, she'll have some justification for that too. She needed the money, she deserved it, the HOA wasn't paying her enough, whatever lets her sleep at night." Deanna squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you stood up to her. Things are so much better now. We all stood up to her eventually. I just went first. Sometimes that's what matters. Someone has to go first. As summer turned to fall, the neighborhood continued to flourish. Property values actually increased because people wanted to live in a well-managed community instead of avoiding it due to the HOA horror stories. Several families who'd left during Brenda's reign told neighbors they wished they'd stayed, that they'd heard things had improved dramatically. The HOA elections came in September. Richard ran for president again and won easily. Joe ran for the board and won. And yes, I let them nominate me, and I won a board position too. We had a good group of people who actually cared about the community and wanted to make it better. My first board meeting was in October. We discussed normal things: budget for snow removal services, scheduling the annual neighborhood cleanup day, reviewing applications for home improvements. It was boring in the best possible way. No drama, no power trips, just people working together to maintain their community. After the meeting, Richard pulled me aside. "You did good tonight. Good questions, good suggestions. You're going to be an asset to this board." "Thanks. It's different than I expected. More administrative, less dramatic," he laughed. "That's how it should be." Brenda turned it into a drama because she got off on the power. But an HOA should be boring. It should just work in the background, maintaining common areas and enforcing basic standards. It shouldn't be the center of everyone's life. I wish I'd moved here after she was gone. Would have saved me a lot of stress. Maybe, but then things might not have changed. Sometimes it takes the right person at the right time to trigger the changes that need to happen. You were that person. I thought about that on the drive home. I hadn't wanted to be that person. I just wanted to clear my driveway without harassment. But circumstances had made me the catalyst for change, and I'd either had to step up or let things continue as they were. Winter came again, my second in the neighborhood. The first snowstorm hit in December, and I was ready with my snow blower. I cleared my driveway easily, then went around the neighborhood helping others. It had become a routine, something I actually enjoyed. No one blocked my driveway. No one took photos looking for violations. No one harassed me about snow pile placement or clearance timing. It was just winter in New England, beautiful and cold and manageable. Diana and I spent Christmas together, sharing traditions and making new ones. On New Year's Eve, we stood on my front porch at midnight, watching fireworks from various neighborhoods in the distance. The year was ending on such a different note than it had begun. "I love you," she said, surprising both of us with the words. I pulled her close. "I love you too." It felt right, standing there with her, in this neighborhood that had tested me and taught me so much about standing up for myself and others. The journey from that cold January morning when I'd plowed snow onto Brenda's parking spot to this moment had been unexpected and challenging. But it had been worth it. January arrived, marking a full year since the snow plowing incident. I woke up on the anniversary and looked across the street at the house that had been Brenda's. The new family had their Christmas lights still up, and I could see toys in the front yard. Kids' snow angels dotted the lawn. It looked like a home, lived in and loved, not a museum piece maintained for appearances. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, thinking about everything that had happened. One act of petty retaliation had exposed corruption, removed a tyrant, and transformed a neighborhood. It seemed almost ridiculous when I thought about it that way. But it was also a reminder that we all have power, even when it doesn't feel like it. We can choose to accept mistreatment, or we can choose to push back. The consequences might surprise us, might be bigger than we anticipate, but that doesn't mean the choice isn't worth making. My phone rang. It was Richard. "Hey Zachary, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" Just got off the phone with the prosecutor's office. Thought you'd want to know that Brenda's appeal was denied. She tried to argue for a reduced sentence, but the judge maintained the original ruling. She'll serve her full 18 months. How much has she served already? About 8 months. She'll be out next summer, but then she's got 5 years of probation. And the restitution, she's making payments, but it'll take her years to pay it all back. Her husband is working 2 jobs now to cover their expenses and the restitution. They're renting a small apartment in the next town over. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that justice had been served, but also something like pity. She'd had everything, a nice house, respect, power, and she'd thrown it all away because she couldn't stop herself from being cruel and greedy. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "No problem. Oh, and one more thing. The board wants to do something for you. A plaque or recognition for your service to the community. You up for that?" "That's not necessary. I just did what anyone should have done." "But not everyone would have done it. Think about it." After we hung up, I looked out my window at the neighborhood. People were going about their lives, walking dogs, kids playing, someone jogging despite the cold. It was normal, healthy, the way a neighborhood should be. I didn't need a plaque. The neighborhood transformation was recognition enough. Knowing that people could enjoy their homes without fear, that families weren't being driven out by harassment, that the HOA was functioning as it should. That was the real reward. Diana came over that afternoon, and we went for a walk around the neighborhood. The winter air was crisp but not unbearably cold. We passed house after house, each one maintained but not obsessively perfect. People's personalities showed through in their choice of decorations, their mailboxes, their landscaping styles. It was diverse, interesting, human. "I was thinking," Deanna said as we walked, "about what this place was like a year ago versus now. It's like night and day. The difference one person can make, for good or bad. Brenda's impact was negative. Yours was positive. I don't know if I'd go that far. I just refused to put up with her behavior, which was positive. Sometimes the most positive thing you can do is refuse to tolerate negativity." We finished our walk and went back to my house. I made dinner while Deanna set the table. It was domestic, comfortable, the kind of evening I'd imagined when I first moved to this neighborhood. It had taken a year and a lot of drama to get here, but we'd made it. Over dinner, Diana asked me something that had been on her mind. "You think you'll stay here long term?" "In this house, this neighborhood, I think so." "Why?" "Just wondering. After everything that happened, I thought maybe you'd want a fresh start somewhere else." "This is my fresh start. The neighborhood without Brenda is completely different from the neighborhood with her. It feels like a new place, even though nothing physical has changed except who lives in that one house." "I'm glad. I'd miss you if you left." "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled and we continued eating. But the question lingered in my mind. Would I stay here long term? The answer was yes, but not just because of the house or the location. I'd stay because I'd invested myself in this community. I'd fought for it, stood up for it, and become part of it in a way I never had in previous places I'd lived. This was home now, in a way that transcended the physical property. It was the neighbors I'd helped, the people who'd stood with me against Brenda, the community we were building together. You don't walk away from that easily. The winter continued, more snow came and went, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I worked, spent time with Deanna, fulfilled my HOA board duties, and helped my neighbors when needed. It was a good life, better than I'd expected when I first moved here. One Saturday in February, I was outside clearing snow when a car pulled up. I didn't recognize it. The window rolled down and a woman about my age looked out. "Excuse me, are you Zachary Jennings?" "Yes, can I help you?" I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm looking to buy a house in this neighborhood, and the realtor told me I should talk to you about the HOA. I leaned my shovel against the garage and walked over. Sure, what do you want to know? Is it true that the previous president was arrested for embezzlement? Yes, about a year ago. But there's new leadership now, and things are much better. The online reviews are mixed. Some from a few years ago are terrible, talking about harassment and unreasonable fines, but the recent ones are all positive. What changed? I explained the situation, keeping it factual and not dwelling too much on my personal experience. I told her about the current board, the new financial controls, and the more reasonable approach to community management. So you'd recommend buying here? She asked. I would. It's a good neighborhood with good people. The HOA drama is behind us. We're focused on building community now, not enforcing petty rules. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. She drove off, and I went back to my snow clearing. But the interaction made me think about reputation and how quickly things can change. A year ago, this neighborhood's reputation was terrible because of Brenda. Now it was improving because we'd addressed the problem. Communities, like people, can change and grow when they're willing to confront their issues. Spring arrived in March, bringing the usual mud season and the first hints of green. The neighborhood started planning the spring cleanup day and the summer event calendar. There was actual enthusiasm about community activities, which Richard said hadn't existed in years. People want to participate when they feel like they are part of something positive, he explained at a board meeting. When the HOA was just about violations and fines, nobody wanted anything to do with it. Now that we're focused on building community, people are engaged. The spring cleanup day in April was a huge success. Almost every household sent someone to help. We cleaned up the common areas, touched up paint on the clubhouse, refreshed the playground mulch, and planted flowers in the entrance garden. It took 6 hours, but the transformation was visible. Afterward, we had a potluck barbecue at the clubhouse. People brought food, kids played, adults socialized. Joe manned the grill, cooking burgers and hot dogs. Deanna and I sat with a group of neighbors, talking and laughing. This is what it should have been all along, Patricia said. A community that actually likes each other. Brenda didn't want a community, Mike added. She wanted subjects to rule over. Well, she's gone and we're still here, I said. That's what matters. As the afternoon turned to evening and people started heading home, I helped clean up. Richard found me carrying trash bags to the dumpster. Thank you, he said simply, for taking out trash, for everything, for standing up, for serving on the board, for helping make this neighborhood what it should be. I just live here, Richard, same as everyone else. Not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have just paid the fines and kept their heads down. You fought back, and it made all the difference. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and went back to cleaning up. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the journey I'd been on. From that first violation notice about trash cans to serving on the HOA board, it had been a wild ride. I discovered things about myself I hadn't known. That I had a spine, that I could stand up to bullies, that I cared about community and fairness more than I'd realized. Summer came, bringing perfect weather and even better community events. The 4th of July party was bigger than ever. We had a neighborhood yard sale that raised money for playground upgrades. The pool opened, and families actually enjoyed it without fear of citation for running or being too loud. Deanna and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary in July. We'd been through a lot together, supporting each other through the Brenda drama and its aftermath. Our relationship had a solid foundation built on shared values and mutual respect. One evening in August, we were sitting on my back deck when she brought up something I'd been expecting. "I got a job offer in Boston," she said quietly. My heart sank. Boston was 2 hours away. "When?" "They want me to start in October. It's a great opportunity, a big step up in my career." "You should take it," I said, even though the words hurt. "I haven't decided yet. There's a lot to consider." "Like what?" "Like you, like us, like this community we've built." "Deanna, you can't turn down a great job for a relationship that's only a year old." "Why not?" "People make choices about what matters to them all the time." We talked late into the night, weighing options and possibilities. Long-distance relationships, commuting, me finding work in Boston. None of the options were perfect, but we both wanted to make it work. In the end, Deanna took the job but kept her house here. She'd commute during the week, staying with a friend in Boston and come back on weekends. It wasn't ideal, but it was doable. "Besides," she said, "I can't leave this neighborhood now that it's finally good. I waited too long for this." She moved to the new schedule in October. The weekends became even more precious, time we didn't take for granted. And it worked, better than I'd expected. The distance made us appreciate each other more, and the weekends together were focused quality time. Fall brought another round of HOA elections. I was re-elected to the board easily. Joe was re-elected too. The community was stable, well-managed, and happy. Everything an HOA should be, but so rarely is. The second anniversary of the snow incident came in January. I marked it privately, thinking about how much had changed. Brenda was out of prison now, serving her probation somewhere else. The neighborhood had moved on completely. New families had moved in who'd never experienced her reign of terror. To them, this was just a nice neighborhood with a functional HOA. Diana and I got engaged in February. She'd been offered a promotion that would let her work remotely most of the time, which solved our distance problem. We started planning a wedding for the following summer. The neighborhood offered to let us use the clubhouse for the reception. It was a generous offer and one we gladly accepted. This place, these people, had become our family. The wedding in June was perfect. Small, intimate, surrounded by people who'd been through so much with us. Joe gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. Richard officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for our wedding. During the reception, I looked around at the faces of our neighbors and friends. These were good people, people who'd found their voices and stood up for what was right. We'd built something real here, a true community. Diana and I bought a house together later that summer, staying in the neighborhood but upgrading to a larger place. We were building a life, one that had started with conflict but had grown into something beautiful. Years passed. The neighborhood continued to thrive. Property values increased. Families stayed instead of fleeing. The HOA became known as one of the best managed in the region. I served on the board for 5 years before stepping down to focus on my family. Deanna and I had 2 kids, both of whom grew up playing in the neighborhood without fear of violation notices for being children. Sometimes I'd drive past what had been Brenda's house and think about that January morning when I'd plowed snow onto her parking spot. It seemed like such a small thing now, almost silly in its petness. But it had been the match that lit the fuse, the moment when someone finally said enough. Was I proud of being petty? Not exactly. But I was proud of standing up, of refusing to be bullied, of exposing corruption and making life better for an entire community. The method might not have been ideal, but the results spoke for themselves. Joe retired from the board after 10 years of service. At his retirement party, he pulled me aside. "You know, that thing with the snow back in the beginning," he said. "Yeah. Best thing that ever happened to this neighborhood. Not the nicest thing, not the most mature thing, but the best thing. Sometimes you need someone willing to get their hands dirty to clean up a mess. I laughed. That's one way to look at it. It's the right way. You changed this place, Zachary. Never forget that. I think about that sometimes, especially when new families move in and comment on what a great neighborhood it is. They don't know the history, don't know what it took to get here. They just see a well-functioning community with reasonable rules and friendly neighbors. And maybe that's how it should be. The past is past. Brenda served her time and moved on with her life elsewhere. We built something better from the ashes of her tyranny. The snow melted long ago, but what remained was a community that learned to stand together, to demand better, and to create the kind of place where people actually want to live. My kids will grow up never knowing what it was like when Brenda ruled the HOA. They'll take for granted the freedom to play in their yard, to ride their bikes, to be kids without constant scrutiny. That's the real victory, the generational impact of standing up to a bully. So yes, I plowed snow onto Karen's freshly cleaned parking spot. It was petty, it was retaliatory, and it was probably childish. But it was also the beginning of something important, a chain reaction that freed an entire community from tyranny and corruption. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the most mature or dignified thing. Sometimes it's just standing up and refusing to take it anymore, consequences be damned. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly what needs to happen to change everything for the better.